আপনারা দেখছেন টকিং পয়েন্ট।
সৌজন্যে মাহবুব এন্ড কো অ্যাকাউন্টেন্টস।
Before we went on the break, we were talking to Rita Payne, President of Commonwealth Journalists Association. Besides being a very well-known and well-established journalist and media personality, I just wanted to share this bit of research that I found out while researching about her, that she was also the bride of the decade of Cosmopolitan magazine. Could you tell us something about that, Rita?
Well, this was a very, very long time ago.
I should have asked you to bring that magazine, that particular...
I should have. I'd forgotten it happened such a long time ago. Well, when I first arrived in the UK, and my husband is English, we got married and came here, and I was very young.
Mm-hmm.
And having been an English announcer, newsreader with All India Radio, and when I came here, I found it difficult to get a job because my main language was English.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying different ways to break into freelance journalism. And I saw this competition in Cosmopolitan magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, look, if you were married in the 70s, could you send a photo and write 200 words?
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I'm half the size I am now. And I was young. So
well, let me say, you are still as lovely as you were.
Oh, you are very kind. So anyway, so we had this wedding in India. We had a traditional marriage where my husband wore the sort of, you know, the typical clothes, the gold brocade long Nehru jacket.
Yep.
And in fact, he had his Nehru jacket.
Did he wear a turban too?
He didn't wear a turban, he wore those shoes.
Mm-hmm,
but what's quite interesting
Vinagra.
is a colleague of mine at All India Radio, her father-in-law had been vice president of India. So when we got married, she took him to a tailor who made the clothes for my husband Jeff, and he'd done stuff for Kennedy when Kennedy visited India. So we had that. And the difference is my husband still fits into those and I don't fit into my blouse. But anyway, so what happened is I wanted to break into journalism. I saw this competition. I thought, if I write something, maybe, you know, that'll be my break and I can get commissioned by Cosmopolitan. And I'm always late for things. So the deadline arrived and I said to Jeff, look, it's now or never. Here's my entry. So we were too late to post it. So we drove, I think it was somewhere near Victoria, I can't remember where it was, and we posted, you know, my little submission. They said a photograph and 200 words, and then left it. I've never won anything before. And 2 weeks later, I got an email from Cosmopolitan saying, congratulations, you have won the competition, you are bride of the decade. And of course it was in the magazine, and you can see in those days the cover has Jerry Hall when she was about 19. And the prize was a 3-day second honeymoon in Paris.
Great.
So we stayed in a hotel and they gave us champagne and we had free trips and dinner. So it was a great experience. It was great fun. And Paris was spoilt for me because after that I expected everything to be paid for whenever I visited Paris.
My question is, did it lead to something more promising, more exciting?
No, it didn't lead to that. No, the Cosmopolitan, that was it. And but afterwards, obviously, through my traveling, because my husband travels everywhere, and I used to go with him. And my first job when I came here was with Payne Books, as in sub-editor. That was fun. And then I did a bit of freelancing, and I went by myself, by train, to Istanbul where my husband was working. And that was an adventure in itself because we were very poor at that time. We didn't have much money. I remember we had about £50 in the bank and Jeff was...
Well, I think you enjoy more when you don't have a lot of money so that you can see so many things by walking, by taking slow moving cars or rickshaws or tom-toms or tuk-tuk, whatever the locals call it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I jumped on the train, which I thought would be the Orient Express, and I think we had about £50 in the bank because we were newly married. Jeff was looking for a job, but he was working, I can't remember, World Bank or somewhere. At that early stages, in a very junior sort of position. And so I thought, okay, I'll just go to Istanbul on the train. So I jumped on the train and went on forever. Anyway, we got there. So that in itself was an adventure. So yes, there's been lots of adventures in my life. And looking back at it, I've got to try and remember half the things now that I've done.
Well, looking at some of the notes that have been handed by my researcher, it said that you were also nominated for the BBC Global Rita Awards in 2009 and also the Asian Woman of Achievement Awards 2006. See, that in itself, that you were nominated, is quite an achievement in our majors, and we thought that it will lead you to further accolades, I'm sure. You went to Rio, you went to Nanjing, you went to Sierra Leone and Solomon Islands in 2010, 2008, 2012 and 2010 again. See, what is your impression about all these countries that you visited? I mean, they were not, some are in America or South America, but going to Sierra Leone and again to Rio, see, this contrast, see, of temperatures and latitudes and longitudes. How did you see the people there?
It's, they were all very, very different. I mean, what I like is, and my husband, I always tease my husband and he always teases me, is that my husband is in international development, architecture, urban planning. So really, throughout the year they've been married, he's basically been looking at housing and land policy. And in that time, I've been roaming over every subject you can think of. I mean, you could almost say I have a grasshopper mind, but because I'm really interested in everything. So I've been very lucky in getting various offers for completely different things. So the reason I went to Rio and to Nanjing is that the United Nations World Urban Forum, they have, I think it's every 2 years, and they asked me to be moderator at some of the sessions. So although it was Rio, it was huge. I think in Rio there must have been 25,000 delegates.
25,000.
So really, it was, you couldn't...
Sounds like a conference.
It was a huge conference. The world, it is a huge conference for people from all over the world. The trouble with those sort of things is that you don't get time to really go out and even find out there's some fascinating people in the next room. But what I did enjoy, and I found, we're looking at housing problems, urban development. So in Rio, I chaired 2 discussions. One was on the impact of climate change, and the other one was looking at cities and development and Haiti, because it was shortly after the Haiti disaster. So those are 2 very different subjects. They were live. There were about 1,000 people in the audience, and you know, you had all the top people in the world. There was the Deputy UN Secretary General. There was a Brazilian foreign minister. There was the Haitian Prime Minister. So they were both huge. Both were totally different subjects, and I had to, as a moderator, I had to go through all the points. And I learned, each thing is learning exercise. So that was that. Then of course the other places you mentioned.
Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone. Well, Sierra Leone and the Solomon Islands, I went as an election observer. And that was fascinating. Solomon Islands was in 2010. And that was the longest journey I've ever made. And it seemed to go on forever and ever and ever. You know, it was about 12, 13 hours from here to Singapore, another change, another 10 hours or so to Brisbane, another 2.5 hours to Honiara. So that was amazing. And then when I went, everyone said...
That sounds like Captain Cook's journey.
Exactly. It seemed to be forever. And then they said to me, well, when I arrived in Honiara, which is the capital, which is a very, very small place, and Solomon Islands is not far from, say, Fiji and from New Zealand, that sort of area. So they said, whatever you do, make sure you aren't sent to North Malaita, because that's where there was some militancy and there'd been trouble just a few years before and riots, and they were known as quite militant people. Sure enough, we were all assigned to different places to go to, and I was assigned to North Malaita and to a small place called Malu. Took 2.5 hours by helicopter, arrived there, and although it was wonderful sea and palm trees, there were no shops really. And there was nothing to eat, and there was no electricity. There were mosquitoes buzzing everywhere. So really, for that night, I was up awake all night, and we couldn't find anything
Where
to
did you
eat.
stay?
We stayed in what looked like a little shop. It was supposed to be a guest house, but really it was just, you know, a little tin shack. And we were paired off, and I was paired off with an Australian election observer. And he happened to have a tin of sardines or something, and with torchlight, we sort of had
Managed
some
to cut
food.
it.
And then we went around the roads. There were hardly roads, there were boulders. And because the sea had, you know, come over, and it's very poor, the Solomon Islands. But what really was impressive is the elections meant so much to the local people. So these polling stations were in remote little schools, and, you know, with the sea, on the seashore, so idyllic, but totally poor. And people would queue from 6, 7 in
Who had
the morning.
organized this election?
The Election Commission, but with
The local
support,
election commission.
the local election commission, but with support from
United
UNDP, United Nations, which is helping a lot, the European Union. There must have been about, I can't think, you know, I'm trying guessing, maybe 10 or 20 different international organizations which were helping with the election. And I do think those things we don't notice. And what was so touching is that people were queuing up from 4, 5 in the morning, walking for miles for a chance to cast their vote. And that made me realize that one can't take elections and voting for granted. These are hard fought for. What was sad is that Solomon Islands, and again I found later on Sierra Leone, where I was also on the observer team, was that these countries are rich in natural resources. They should not be poor. They've got minerals, they've got forests, they've got all sorts of things you could ever expect. But
Tourism.
money, tourism hasn't been developed enough, but the money does not get through to the people. So really what happens is, you know, foreign countries, multinationals will pay governments and ministers, so they pay next to nothing in tax. The money goes to a few ministers, and it doesn't go to the people. And that I find very, very sad, because I think the potential for these countries to be self-sufficient is just there. And you need to enlighten people.
Yeah, well, that is
to keep it.
unfortunate, because United Nations involves itself in organizing elections and sends observers to monitor. But after the elections, where does the money go? Nobody is answerable to nobody. See, so the role of United Nations is over. We have organized an election. You have elected your leaders, representatives, and there you are. See, now you manage you are on your own. But really, they are not capable of managing things on their own. I'm not talking about the leaders. I'm talking about the masses. And this is happening in many countries, not just in Solomon Islands, but in many Asian countries, many African countries, probably many South American countries, that the masses are so detached. They do exercise their right to vote. An election is held, sometimes fair, sometimes slightly fair, sometimes slightly less fair, but then nothing changes for the masses. Probably it brings a lot of changes for the leaders, those who are very close to them, their leaders. They have a cadre, they have a group of people who support their leaders. But I do not know. Democracy is fantastic. See, one has got the right to elect somebody, he exercises. But where do we go from there after we have elected if those representatives do not deliver? We'll talk about this and many other interesting topics, hopefully, after the break. So thank you, viewers, for being with us. Don't go away. We'll be back soon.
আপনারা দেখছেন টকিং পয়েন্ট।
সৌজন্যে মাহবুব এন্ড কো অ্যাকাউন্টেন্টস।